The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you, and it must be Friday, and indeed it is. It is Friday, August 21st, and we are coming at you live from the Scottsdale Money Radio Air Park Studios, 1510 AM, 105.3 FM, and the World Wide Web, moneyradio1510.com. If this is the first time you're tuning in, our show is about how older adults can live a healthier, happier life. How do we do that? We do that by bringing extraordinary guests to the show. We're coming up on almost 8 years. We've done nearly 400 shows. You can catch them up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button, third button down is radio show. So as I said, guests are what make our show. And today I have an extraordinary guest back for his third time. He hasn't been on the show in nearly 4 years. He was here in March of 2015 and was here in August of 2016. Welcome back to the show, Rabbi Stephen Kahn. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you.
It's good to have you.
Yeah, you should have me back more often.
I should.
You should.
And you know what? I haven't seen you in forever because of this thing called COVID. And it's really, impacted me in terms of connecting with you personally. And you also got a chance to go on sabbatical, which is something I'm sure you definitely needed to do, especially with the demands that are made of you of our community, or at least our congregational community. Update us a little bit about your bio. I do know this. I've known you for about 17 years.
Yes, you have.
Because my father and my stepmother have been married for 17 years. You were a new young buck from the Bay Area here. I think you came over when you were 34 years old. So
it was my first wedding here in Scottsdale. It was for your dad and Maddie, and it was the same day the space shuttle blew up on re-entry.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a big day.
That was a big day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and certainly a day that my dad and my stepmother remember for other reasons, and they're still married, happily married, going on their 18th year, as my father would like to say.
There you go.
So what have you been up to? What are you doing?
Oh, nothing. It's been a whirlwind for these last 6 months, as you know, and everybody listening knows. And we have been really, in many regards, inspired by what we're seeing in the community. I know that this is a dark time, but it's also, I react when people say these are unprecedented times. My reaction is, I disagree with that. To say that this is unprecedented would mean that there's never been any bad times ever.
Right.
I would not tell that to a World War II veteran that these are unprecedented. I mean, you think yellow fever, Black Plague, the Spanish virus, AIDS. I mean, this is part of life, is that life is also suffering. And we've seen a lot of that. On the other end, I think the salvific force, if you will, which some people call God, really acts and plays through human activity and interaction and what people's choices are. And many people have turned this into an opportunity for connection in a way that they hadn't before.
Right.
Yeah.
No doubt. And talk about connection. I mean, for you as our spiritual leader, you have found ways to connect with your congregants. And certainly, our congregational services that we have weekly still happen, but they happen virtually. And I'd love to learn from you what that must be like, because doctors have been here on the show, and they've talked about doing stuff through telemedicine. They're like, it's not the same because they need to touch their patients and they need to, rotate that shoulder or check out that knee, but they do the best they can. What's it been like for a congregational rabbi to be, the spiritual leader and not being able to have people in the pews, in the audience, and being able to connect with them?
It's different. It's, we like to hug before services, after services. The Jewish expression Shabbat Shalom, wishing someone a happy Sabbath before a service, always includes a hug. And the idea that we are very relational people. We'd like to be, as you were just saying, physically connected in space, whether it's sacred space or out in the parking lot. But it's been challenging. On the other hand, I have felt incredibly connected to the people who watch on Zoom when we teach a class or write comments on our live stream, because I know them and they know me and our clergy team, and because the relationship that we already had before coronavirus was not just intact, but became incredibly important and connecting during a time when physically we couldn't share space. So it's been bizarre, but it's also been incredibly meaningful. Participation has increased considerably.
And I found this in my business, doing virtual connections.
It's hard.
It is hard, but look, I don't have to get in the car. I don't have to drive. I have everything at my fingertips, and I find my connections more meaningful.
Yes.
Even though they're not physical, but I mean, I don't have distractions. I mean, I am with that person that is coming out of my laptop.
Yeah.
And connected. And I'm guessing that you're affirming, because that's the same for you.
It's a different kind of energy and a different kind of attention, because you're focused on whoever's on the screen. You're focused on whoever is in those little boxes.
Right.
And that kind of focus is a whole nother level of relationship. So I do think it's deeper. I do. And you have to really pay attention. And you and I are the kind of guys, we like to work a room.
Right.
So sitting on a screen with 4 or 5 people, 6 people, 8, whatever, being focused for that long is really a new skill. But it also, it's really, I think you're right, it comes more directly from the heart. I feel terrible for older people who aren't able to have people visit them. I know they miss their grandchildren, and they miss their children, and they miss their hugs, and they miss their kisses. And that's who I feel most bad for. You and I were lucky.
Right.
We get to be healthy. We get to go out. We get to do certain things. I feel bad. Not bad for, but my heart is really broken for people who have not had human connection from those who are closest to them for 6 months now. Which are your clients.
I did a show last week with Dana Marie Kennedy. She is the AARP state director, and we talked about the challenges that are happening in these communal living spaces. Your significant other runs one, and it's challenging, and they want to keep the virus out, but we have older adults that are living in there that were before COVID-19 suffering from social isolation.
Sure.
And we know what that does to them. That brings on depression, brings on other health ailments. They say it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So, how do we build that? And Dana has been working really hard with not only our local state government, but the federal government too, so that we can get family members to come in. And the CMS has a rule, it's called the compassionate care, and it's not for those that are just dying, for those that are challenged with being alone. And we need to figure out ways to be more connected. In the second segment, I do have a special guest that is going to be coming in through recording, and she has a few questions for you. Not questions, but more observations for you relative to Torah. And
can't wait.
I know you can't wait, but it's hard to believe the time does go fast. This is our first segment. We got 3 more up ahead. But I can't thank you enough for being here with me. I miss you, brother. I really do. You look great.
Thank you. Well, we started with you two. We're coming out with Coldplay. It couldn't be bad. We're looking forward to the next segment.
And I must say, I told you I knew you when you were 34. The gray, you look like Moses.
I look like you.
No, you look like me, but you look like you went up to Mount Sinai and you're coming down with the tablets, and
I did go to Sedona.
Sedona,
They have
Mount
it.
Sinai, but you got that gray like Charlton Heston did when he came down. I'm telling you. I want to give a visual to
That's
our
a lot
listeners.
of pressure.
You've been listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I've got my Rabbi Stephen Kahn, and good friend here in the studio. Stick around. We got 3 more segments. We'll be right back. The safety of older loved ones during this pandemic has posed the greatest challenge for many families. Hi, this is Bob Roth, managing partner of Cypress HomeCare Solutions. I know many of you are nervous to choose a communal living option for your elderly loved ones these days, but HomeCare remains the safest alternative. For over 25 years, Cypress HomeCare has served our community, and today we continue to help families by placing high-quality caregivers into their homes that follow the strictest CDC safety and testing guidelines. Cypress HomeCare is here for them, and we're here for you. Bathing, meal preparation, medication reminders, and so much more, whether it's a couple times a week or every day. So if you want to keep your loved ones safe and at home, call us today at 602-264-8009 or look us up on the web at cypresshomecare.com.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. If you're just tuning in, we're in our second segment, and I'm really pleased to have my rabbi and good friend, Rabbi Stephen Kahn, here in the studio. And if you missed the first segment, go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button, third button down is radio show. You'll catch that first segment and many others. So, Steve, great to have you here in the studio. You have done some new things. You are now like the head of the rabbis here. What is your title now?
I am the president of the Board of Rabbis of Greater Phoenix, yes. I'm in my second year of a 2-year term.
Fantastic. And our associate rabbi was the president one time, right?
Our former associate rabbi, Rabbi Keller, who's in Florida now, but yes, he was president too.
And I don't know if you read my column I wrote about a month or 2 ago, 2 months ago, talking about something that he had taught me in Torah study, and that was the liminal space.
Right.
And we are in that liminal space, are we not?
We are definitely in a liminal space.
So we're right there in the middle between what was and what is about to be.
Correct.
And certainly, we want to bring over to what is about to be all the good stuff and try to leave all that bad stuff behind us.
This great Israeli author, David Grossman, modern Israeli author, wrote a piece in Haaretz newspaper in March. And the thing about in March, that was not a great time.
Right.
And in Israel, especially at that time, they were having a lot of coronavirus. And his article was about the possibilities on the other side. What would change? What would be? He called it not liminal space. He called it a transformational moment. And as a San Franciscan, I call it tectonic shifts.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the middle of a tectonic shift, and physically and spiritually, the world will be different when the shift is over, or the transformation is over. And so I do like to focus on the possibilities, very much so.
And I liked how you said in the first segment, we're looking at the good. There is going to be a lot of good that's coming out of this. Our carbon footprint, much smaller than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're not commuting, and we're doing a lot of things that, are keeping us from, releasing more carbon into the atmosphere, but also working. Do we really need to be, commuting downtown and working in these big offices when a lot of us have been able to work from home?
Right.
So there's a lot of good that comes from this. So, I bring up, the Torah study, right?
Yes.
And that's where I really learned that. I do have a special guest that is going to come on the show right now just via recording. And she's been here on the show, and she's my best friend in life. She is my partner in life, and we have 3 amazing daughters, and We have an amazing dog, soon to have another one tomorrow. So we're really excited. But
is that what empty nesters do? They just keep acquiring dogs?
It's a good time.
It is.
It's a good time to do a lot of training right now because we're home.
Right.
And our other dog's getting a little bit older, so maybe this new one put a little more pep in the step.
There you go.
But as it relates to Torah study and social isolation, we talked about that at the end of the first segment. Social isolation is really one of the biggest tragic things that are happening to our elders. And Susie took the time to she's a student, and she wanted to correlate some of the learnings that she has picked up and have you expound on them. So with that, James?
In doing my homework for our meeting, I recognized an important parallel between life in the pandemic and life of the Israelites wandering the desert after they left Egypt, and that is the monotony of the day. I mean, the Israelites had shade to travel by and manna from heaven, and although comparatively speaking, we wouldn't think that was comfortable, they were provided for, but they had monotony in their daily routines. And we, as we experience the pandemic, we experience a sense of monotony because our social calendars are not filled, and we haven't gone on to experience the normal amount of interaction that we normally have. And the monotony and the uncertainty has fueled social rebellion, as it did as well with the Israelites when they journeyed for 40 years. There were many uprisings, but it's also contributed to a sense of anxiety and depression and isolation that is important to recognize.
Yeah, so, Susie.
Wow. Now, I've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
You're one of the first people I met here. I love you guys, and I love your family. She is your better half by far.
No question. I know. And she's incredibly smart and a big-time student of the Torah. And,
It's a beautiful question.
And the thing is the correlation is so real. It's like it's timeless because that happened back in those times, and the same things are happening now.
Right.
And I hear people saying it's like Groundhog's Day. It's like day after day. I asked my dad, how's he doing? And he says, well, it's day 140 that I've been in and staying at home. So, I'd love for you to expound a little bit on that. And
well, let's do as much as we can before the next break, and then we can always continue. For those of you who are listening, Torah is what we use as a Hebrew word for teaching, but it's the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And what Susie is remarking on is this 40-year journey from when the Israelites left Egypt until they arrived at the Promised Land. And there's 2 key features, probably more than 2, but I'll just name 2 quickly. One is, as Susie pointed out, a level of isolation in the wilderness. In fact, the book of Numbers in Hebrew is called Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness, which is very much where we are right now, symbolically. The second point I want to make is when we look at the Torah, when we look at Bible, we're looking at a mirror of ourselves, always. The stories are the same, but we change. And so it is a direct question that we can start answering now and then continue later. The Israelites had each other. There were, according to the text, 600,000 plus or minus Israelites who left Egypt, including a mixed multitude, people who sort of jumped on the bandwagon with Moses and left Egypt. So they had each other, but that was a blessing and a curse. When you get a group that size together in close proximity to each other, it's not great always. But it's not great to be alone in the wilderness. And Susie's exactly right. The anxiety that came along with that, the monotony of 40 years. I mean, think about 40 years.
Wow.
It's a long time. That's half our lives, more or less, being in the wilderness. What's incredible is that generation that left Egypt, according to our tradition, did not make it to the land of Israel. In other words, that entire generation died before their children and grandchildren walked over into the promised land, with two exceptions, a man named Caleb and a man named Joshua. And so I don't want to give an oversimplified response to Susie's very deep question. Human beings always, always, always have choices. Always. Free will is at the core of... Free will is just as much at the core of our belief system as God is at the core of our belief system. Community and how we behave within the community and how we respond to anxious times, how we respond to our own wilderness experiences, these are our choices. And people choose different ways of dealing with it. What concerns me as a rabbi, as a Jew, is what am I doing? How am I responding? How am I sharing my heart and my time, but also acknowledging my own humanity in caring for the world and caring for others and interacting with others? And going back, as Susie did, to the Torah, you realize the first thing I think we all need to tell ourselves is how hard it is. And acknowledge that we're human and that this is sad and that we have feelings of loss and depression and all of the things that she stated in isolation. But social distancing does not mean social isolation. It does not mean social isolation. I've been saying that since the beginning.
I've been using physical distancing. Let's abolish social distancing.
Physical distancing is not about physical isolation.
Right.
And I don't love Zoom. I don't love doing things live stream either. I don't love wearing a mask. But as King Solomon said famously, Gamze Ya'avor, this too shall pass. We will get to the other side of it. My concern is, day by day, how can we better interact with each other? How can we take better care of each other? And we can talk about the protests and the other ramifications that came at a time when the country could not handle one more thing, one more terrible moment. And I think we reacted, all of us, in a way that was appropriate for the time. Some inappropriate. But in mass, I thought it was an appropriate response. Not the violent part.
No, not the violent part, but I mean, it is interesting how history does repeat itself. And here, here we are thousands of years later, and while, our living conditions are a lot better than it was for the Jews that left Egypt, we're dealing with a lot of the same issues.
But my question is, what has changed?
Right.
That would be the question. What really fundamentally has changed in the human experience?
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and we are in our second half. And if you missed the first half, I got Rabbi Kahn here in the studio. You can catch it up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button, third button down's radio show. You'll catch that show and many, many others. So if you were with us the first half, we had a little technical glitch. So we got caught off right in the very, very end. And we were talking about a Torah passage.
At least we only used appropriate language.
We did.
During the glitch.
We didn't use James' name, and we didn't defame. He's
playing great music. So.
He is playing great music, and that's why I keep him around, because he's always got the great tunes going. But we were talking about the similarities to what the Jews went through when they left Egypt to what we're experiencing now, and then even the correlation in Egypt, the plagues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some
it's
would
a
say
plague.
We're dealing with
right in the middle of one.
We're doing this right now.
It feels like all 10 of them. If you look at the fires in California, and you look at the civil unrest, and you look at the coronavirus, and you look at flooding, and you look at all the things that are happening as part of climate change, it feels like we're having all 10 plagues in a very short proximity of time.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you came to full closure on what we were talking about, but I think you left off talking about civil unrest.
Yes.
And then that's where we...
So in the book of Numbers, there are a couple of times when there are rebellions. The Israelites and certain factions, become they were actually the original tribes. So when we talk about tribalism, they were tribes. But there were certain factions within the tribes that would start to second guess and question Moses or question Aaron or question leadership, and then try to usurp authority and take over and bring followers along with them. And never turned out well for the rebels, of course. But there is that element of human nature, I think, when the monotony that Susie talked about in her question becomes overwhelming.
Right.
There's almost this, we call it fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an element of society that will fight.
Right.
So it's sort of the antithesis of the depressed isolation is get out of my house and start fighting because my brain is telling me that this monotony is making me want to do something. And I think the good and the bad of the book of Numbers has many stories where there's this arc where people don't know what to do with themselves and they won't follow the leadership. And in times like this, when I think it's very safe to say, regardless, that there's a lack of defined leadership, human beings take matters into their own hands.
It's that free will.
That's back to free will.
It is that free will, and we're experiencing that right now.
Mm-hmm. And
certainly, the middle of an election too. I
Sure.
mean, this has really made things even more prominent.
And I said to you during the break, Bobby, that I'm 50, almost 52. I've never lived in a time when I've seen so many Americans hate each other.
Right.
Like, hate each other. And we were just listening to Philadelphia from Bruce Springsteen coming in, and you think about the ancestors, our forefathers who sat in Philadelphia and sat at the Constitutional Congress and looked at every document that they could and were incredibly intelligent and enlightened people, not perfect. And you look at the fights that they had off the Constitution. They didn't love each other, but there was a level of civility in how we formed this country. And what's bothering me the most is the incivility that is shown in media and online, and the conspiracy theories that are being spun as a result of, QAnon, for example, cults like QAnon take advantage. This is perfect ground for them. This is the most fertile ground for them.
Sure.
Of people hating each other, of people being insecure financially and otherwise, health, financial, personal, of people not knowing what to do if they're being a vacuum in leadership. And so cults like QAnon take advantage. It's perfectly lined up for them. And we need not just the president, we need every public official, including me right now. I'm not a public official, but I'm a rabbi, to say cults are the antithesis of civil society. Period. And there's no room for them.
No, there is no room. And, it's interesting because when we started our show,
Mm-hmm.
you talked about some of the good that's come out.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the good is being so overshadowed by all this because there are so many good people that are doing so many good things during these really, really dark days that they are just getting washed out by all this evil that is being perpetrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really sad.
But you're right. There's a lot of good going on.
There really is. And that's the thing that I love about humanity and I love about people because I truly believe this, and I know you as a spiritual leader do too. People are good.
It's a human being. I believe that people are good.
They are.
And that's why it's so hard to see people hating on each other.
Right.
It's just not, it's not us.
I mean, the battles that we see, and you brought it up so well, the media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are coming through to you, our listeners, through radio, but I mean, you see the fights about masks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's crazy. I saw one that was in Tucson over at Sprouts,
Mm-hmm.
and this guy was indignant, and I mean, he was yelling and cursing and screaming and saying that free will, it's my right. Why can't we just all live together
Mm-hmm.
and work together? Because when we are united, good things happen.
I think it's safe to say we all don't like wearing masks. They're not comfortable. It's hard to breathe. I get very uncomfortable, a little claustrophobic wearing it. But we have a responsibility to each other.
We do.
Period. And that overrides any perceived or real freedoms that people think exist. People have a freedom to be healthy too.
Well, the best thing about it too is that if you really understand the mask, the science behind it, I wear a mask to protect you, you wear a mask to protect me.
Beautiful.
It's a good thing, and it shows respect
And isn't that what we should be doing without argument?
without argument.
Mm-hmm.
So my better half, she has another
Oh boy,
piece. Yeah,
bring it on.
I'm
Yay,
gonna
Susie.
have James line it up. Go for it.
Two times specifically in the Torah, they say the words lo tov, not good, and both had to do with isolation and loneliness. And one was in the story of creation, when God realized it was not good to be alone, and specifically took the rib from Adam to create Eve. And then the second time was when Jethro advised Moses, that was Moses' father-in-law, advised him that it was not good to lead this people alone. And I'm sure, in addition to the loneliness, it's hard to lead alone. And you've probably been experiencing that as well, Rabbi Kahn.
Well, there she goes again with two great questions. So let's talk about the first one first.
Right.
That is true. The only thing in creation, so God creates the heavens and the earth and says it's good, and the sun and the moon, and it's good. Everything is good until it says it's not good for Adam, which is the generic for human being, this human being, to be alone. And so God creates a mate, a partner. Again, going back to what we said before, isolation does not mean that you have to be alone. Physically, you might be alone, but spiritually, you don't have to be alone. And one of the things I told you offline, all of March, all of April, we did daily check-ins, we did classes, we did any opportunity that we could to get people to see each other's face and realize that they were not alone.
I love that about the congregation.
Was so important to us. It's not the same. It's not.
No.
It's not the same as being in flesh and blood with other people. My dad died March 8th, which was 1 week before the airline shut down. So fortunately, I was able to, my family's from San Francisco, go up to San Francisco and do a proper burial. But my dad gave me a great gift, which was, because I had to do my mourning more or less alone. And in Judaism, mourning is all about community and food. And people bring you food to your house.
So true.
And so I learned from my dad's death that even if you get ripped off from the opportunity to mourn properly, or you're in high school and you got ripped off to graduate properly,
Right.
or you missed your wedding because of coronavirus, you got the choice. Are you going to bury yourself in your grief and bury yourself in, I hate to use the expression, but self-pity? Or are you going to use it as an opportunity to make sure others don't feel that way? And that's what we did. So I credit my dad's death and my father as a person, because you knew him very well. He would give you the shirt off of his back. And so
Great
what
guy.
his life informed me, March 8th and following, was do not make anyone feel like they don't have someone. Make sure everyone doesn't feel alone. Make sure everyone feels included and loved. And I did what he did.
What a great gift.
Which is just talk to people.
And you know what? I did know him.
He loved you, Bobby.
And he was a great guy.
You were an honorary Boychik.
I was. He always said to me, you know, how you doing, Boychik? And he always made sure to tell me that he was from Louisville. Did I say it right? Louisville.
Kentucky, that's right.
Yeah, but he was just a class act, a gentleman.
Thank you.
Always, whenever he saw me, he'd go out of his way
Yes.
to come over and say hello.
So that's what taught me to make sure no one felt they were standing in the room, even if they were at home by themselves. So we made every effort to go into their homes and hang out with them, and that's what my dad taught me, and that was the gift of his death.
Love that.
Me too.
You've been listening
He's
to
a
Health
good man.
Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth. I've got my good friend, my spiritual leader, and some sage advice that you just gave us, Rabbi Stephen Kahn, here in the studio. We've got one more segment.
I got to answer Susie's second question, too.
There you go. We'll be right back. You know, the safety of older loved ones during this pandemic has posed the greatest challenge for many families. Hi. This is Bob Roth, managing partner of Cypress HomeCare Solutions. I know many of you are nervous to choose a communal living option for your elderly loved ones these days, but HomeCare remains the safest alternative. For over 25 years, Cypress Home Care has served our community. And today we continue to help families by placing high-quality caregivers into their homes that follow the strictest CDC safety and testing guidelines. Cypress Home Care is here for them, and we're here for you. Bathing, meal preparation, medication reminders, and so much more, whether it's a couple times a week or every day. So if you want to keep your loved ones safe and at home, call us today at 602-264-8009 or look us up on the web at cypresshomecare.com.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. If you're just tuning in, we're in our fourth segment. I'm talking really fast because I want to hear more from my good friend and my guest here today and my spiritual leader, Rabbi Stephen Kahn. Welcome back.
So, Susie's second question had to do with Moses. Moses is doing everything in the beginning of Exodus by himself. He's adjudicating every issue of the 600,000 people. And really what his father-in-law gives him really great advice and says, look, dude, you can't do this alone. I don't think he used the word dude, but you can't do this alone. Appoint courts, magistrates, get some help. And so I think that, Susie's question about, look, I have an associate rabbi, Rabbi Sarah Mason Barkin, who's fabulous, Cantor Seth Eniger, who's fabulous. We've got a fifth-year rabbinic student on staff now, Jason Bronowitz, full-time. I've got plenty of people, and we've got I am so blessed.
You got a great administrator, too.
Oh, Robin?
Robin.
Oh,
yeah.
Robin.
I mean, I don't know how you pulled that one off.
She's the bomb. She's great.
Yeah.
She's my partner.
Yep.
So, in other words, no one can do this by themselves. I understand there are a lot of ministers and clergy who are doing it alone, and I don't know how they're doing it alone. But I'm very, very, very blessed. I also have a very active congregation. So we've got volunteers who have made phone calls 2 or 3 times over the summer just to check in with people. But Jethro is right. You can't do it alone. And Susie, I would not be able to do this alone. I wouldn't. I've got great partners. And the other beautiful thing is we contrast each other and complement each other. And so Rabbi Mason Barkin runs programs that aren't necessarily programs that I would even think about running. But she's got a great following of people. We're a large congregation. We're 100 years old, and it's great to have other people.
So your message to the audience is you don't have to do this alone.
Right.
Engage, bring people along with you. I mean, and that's something I've always talked about, is that we as neighbors, friends, I mean, we need to find ways to connect.
Correct.
And it's so important. I mean,
I want to validate, and I know you do too, how it feels to be alone. Validate that feeling and that it's awful and it's not normal. And there is no new normal. There's only change. There's only different. But once we can validate and accept that we're pretty sad. I am too, by the way. I mean, you just said at the beginning, it's the first time I've seen you in 6 months.
Right.
That's not fun. You and I have lunch a lot.
We do, and I didn't even really get a chance to get closure with you losing your dad.
Exactly,
I mean,
right?
I haven't been with you. I mean, it means a lot. I mean, I still wasn't able to hug you, but I gave you an elbow.
An elbow's good. But Bobby, acknowledging that, and I was talking about the gift from my father, I had to acknowledge that, and then I had to say you have a choice. And what I think you and I are encouraging here is the choice is isolation does not mean that you have to be alone.
Right. And we started the program off talking about seniors and living in these communities. And really, we as adult children, we as neighbors, we as friends need to figure out ways to connect with them. What is this going to look like when we get to the other side? Because I will tell you, my aunt lives in Connecticut now. She lived in Florida for 34, 35, 36 years and wanted to be close to her daughter. And she looks at 4 walls every day, and she gets her meals delivered at the door. I mean, she doesn't go down to dining. She doesn't participate in the activities. She gets a home health aide come a couple days a week to help her with bathing.
I have a little different viewpoint on this. We are learning through some of the surveys that we've done, because we have our High Holy Days coming up. that there are a lot of people in their 70s and their 80s who are saying, we understand the risk. And in Judaism, by the way, the authority for you and your body and what you do with your body is not even God. It's you. You are the authority of what you want to do with your body. And so what they're saying to us is their spiritual health, their need to be in community, exceeds their worry and their concern. This is not everybody, but there is a group of people, 70s and 80s. And so now the ethical question is, do we create opportunities specifically for the high holidays, but also for Sabbath services, for public worship? Because the core of Jewish worship is the public aspect. And we're doing anything online. So the question that we are grappling with now, especially as some of the numbers begin to dive, is will we be offering some semblance of public worship for the holy days? And it's a fascinating conversation. I'm not into hyperbole, so I don't want to have hyperbolic conversations about either side of this, but really pushing myself to think of a way to take care of people's spiritual needs, to sit in a room with other people in a very strictly safe environment.
I love that.
And that's what we're thinking about. So I don't think it's all or nothing. I don't think it's black and white. I think that one of the things that we have to be willing to do is to have the courage to say the disease is real, the science is real, the protections are real, all of this is real, but humans' capacity and need to be together is also real. And have that conversation and be courageous about it and maybe do some things and make some decisions not everyone would approve of, but are valid and based in science.
I love that you're going through that process. We have to.
Yeah.
And it's so important for us to be...
Because this disease isn't going anywhere.
No, it's not.
No.
It's going to be here for a little
Someone's going to have that conversation at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're almost done. What questions have I not asked of you? What kind of lasting messages do you want to leave for our listeners?
3 things. Number 1, turn off the news. Limit yourself. When you were a kid, your parents limited your television.
Exactly.
My parents did not allow us to watch television weekdays. We snuck some in, of course.
Well, I had to go see like the Brady Bunch. And
I was
Partridge
just
Family.
about to say the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
That is so funny.
Exactly.
Limit television. The media on cable television has one goal right now, which is ratings. So they will scare you and scream at you and allow other people to scream at you so you'll keep watching. Stop watching the television. Stop watching the internet. Number 2 is do not let evil people who lead cults take any of your attention. And the most important thing is find ways of connecting. If you want to have faith in humanity and you want to have faith in the future and you want to know that there are possibilities and you want to know that we have opportunities when this passes to get even closer to other people, connect.
Connect on good things, not on the mishigash,
We just
the craziness.
we
that
just
is
spent
going
an
on.
hour having a productive, wonderful, friendly conversation. Was that so hard? And you and I don't agree on everything,
We
but
don't.
was that difficult?
No.
No. And this changes the world from my perspective.
I love it.
Yeah. So the first 2 are a little dark. The third one is my most important message. Possibilities, opportunities, connection.
Inspiring.
Thank you.
Always are that way with me and your congregants
Thank you.
and our community. So great to have
very
you on
kind.
the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you.
Let's not make it 4 years, my friend.
Well, let's make it maybe the end of this year. So
right.
we will see.
And maybe we'll just bring Susie in and let her lead it.
Exactly. You've been listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. Rabbi Stephen Kahn, thank you for being on the show. We'll be back next Friday.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress HomeCare Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.